Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Just Another Kill Team podcast, connecting kill team communities across the globe. If you're passionate about the tactical skirmish game that brings together strategy, lore, and creativity, you are in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and stay updated with our latest episodes. If you want to support the show, check out our Patreon. Your support means a lot to us. Follow us by using the social media links in the podcast description for all the latest news, and be sure to leave a review to let us know what you think. Thanks for tuning in. Here's today's episode. Welcome, friends. We've made it to another episode. Hello. We're here with Quinn.
From Segmentum, Colorado?
Yes, that's right. I'm more of a recent addition to that Discord, but shout out Segmentum, Colorado for providing organization and tournaments for Kill Team in the Denver metropolitan area. All the way up to Loveland, and shout out to the guys down in Colorado Springs. I've only played you a couple times, but I know they have a big scene down there as well. That's where I'm from. But most of the time, I play on the Command Point server on TTS because I live at least 45 minutes away from a game.
There's some tough stomping grounds on the TTS, so you're playing among sharks.
It's so vicious when you're just learning. Because somebody will be nice and decide to play with you for the first couple of times, and then you just get absolutely smashed. And you're just learning how to move the pieces around, and the TTS is also fighting you, and you're just I don't even know if I can play the game. But
yeah, historically I have not been super pro TTS, but if you have no other options, TTS is better than nothing. And right now TTS at least is pretty good at getting you into the game with all the add-ons and all the mods. It does let you set up a lot easier than having to spin up another website and pull up a list and try to do some other stupid stuff that you had to do it in the early days of TTS.
Yes, absolutely. And then the huge benefit of TTS 2 is that if you want to try a team, try it. There's no investment.
That's true.
Are you planning to go to any other live tournaments then? You've been playing on TTS. It sounds like you've had enough experience where you're feeling comfortable since you're here to talk about building up game plans for teams. So are you looking to go to LVO or some other large tournament in the near future?
Well, Travis, it's funny you should mention that. I am, in fact, going to LVO. I will be... I'm there also to visit a friend, but I'm going to be hanging out with some of the people from the Colorado Discord, and I decided to go to LVO because I thought I'm more of a mid-level player, and I thought it would be a really excellent opportunity to go and play other players who are really, really good, improve my own game, just go into the tournament without any expectations on performance and only use it as an opportunity to learn. So that's why, I want to go to LVO, and that's also why I'm trying to talk to you guys about building strategies.
Yeah, I think a lot of my level up. I mean, one of my first big level up moments was LVO for Kill Team 2 years ago or something. I mean, I played Compendium Guard, and I've been I've had good player concepts for a while, but just I love to play horrible teams.
Sometimes you have to get the bug out of you. Sometimes
you
gotta prove yourself. Maybe this is not how I want to spend my time at a tournament.
Yeah. I still am I love my horrible teams, and Phobos was horrible for a long time, and now they're not. And then people didn't realize how good they were yet. So there's this sweet spot where I can play a team that used to be horrible, and they're absolutely not, but not acknowledged. I don't know.
Unfortunately, those days are gone because you've gone to the World Championships. You came back the best Phobos player in the world, at least as far as World Championships is concerned.
That's true.
Yeah.
Man, Phobos is insanely good.
Yeah, man, I hate it when I go to Worlds and I become the best in faction. That's really I just hate it when I put my city on the map.
Well, you know what, Quinn? It's time. You got the whole competitive year, and we were here to talk a little bit how you actually come up with a game plan. Because Jason, this is something that Jason and me have talked about from time to time, but we really wanted to take a little bit of a deep dive this week. So both of you have game plans for teams that you're testing. Quinn, sounds like you've got a lot of stuff coming up for LVO. So maybe we don't want to reveal too many secrets, but maybe we could give a little bit of a teaser of some stuff you're working on.
I, like always, will reveal all of my secrets. Also, a little bit of a preview. Quinn and I chatted. I was like looking for a game in TTS, and he jumped in, and we chatted a little bit, and it was just like, how do we level up? And we had a conversation about it, and I was like, this is a very interesting topic. So pretty much just like continue the conversation of like, how do we level up? Because this is a journey for everyone. It's a journey for me. It's a journey for you, the listener. It's a journey for Travis. It's a journey for Quinn. We're all here. We're all trying to get better. And like Quinn was asking all the right questions, which continued because after that we played a TTS game, and I am trying to like sniff out some sauce for the Space Marine Scouts, looking to see if there's like a cool, unique way to play them. And they've been like doing absolutely atrociously in the stats, but like, I mean, I love my scouts, and like one of the local players, Brian, if he's listening, shout out to Brian, obliterated me with some scouts, and I was like, oh man, I love me some scouts, and I've got to like get back into it. So I dabbled a little bit, pulled 0 punches, played against Quinn on TTS as a little primer here. You beat me pretty hard. Like I pulled no punches. And it's all part of like the building a strategy thing, but throughout the game and what I saw in the game and the observations that you had afterwards, you're on an amazing track here to level up quickly. I think that's very interesting. You asked so many interesting questions. Your observations about the game are amazing, and I feel like you're just on like this hot natural track to level up, and we want to like squeeze that juice out of you to help everyone else that listens level up as well.
Well, should I hope so, man? This is like, I'm not supernaturally gifted at these kinds of games, so I have to try really hard. And it's always nice to, hear from other people that like I'm asking the right questions, and they see like that sort of a drive to improve, because I try to carry that into a lot of the things I do.
Yeah.
And don't sell yours, of course, Jason. Like I was horrified the entire time we were playing the game, because the way that you move those 10 wound bricks up the board is very scary. And,
yeah.
I think if a couple dice rolls didn't go my way, we would have had a little bit of a different outcome on that one. But if we're going back to the topic of building up game plans, the things that Jason and I were talking about after we played our game was I'm playing Warp Coven. I'm meta chasing. Sue me. I wanted to learn how to craft a game plan against Hyrotech a bit better.
Yeah.
They're both really strong teams. Part of the fun of playing those two teams against each other is that they're both kind of cracked. So nobody's really like having an insane feels bad moment about one team being insanely strong versus another team. But I think I want to go over the game plan that we came up with really quickly, and then maybe we can walk Travis through perhaps building up a game plan against maybe Hyrotech, maybe another team with the Wrecker crew.
For my part, I'm interested to see what you two have cooked up, because I've been thinking about playing the Wrecker crew. Whether or not I get a chance to play it at a large tournament anytime soon, it's definitely a team that I want to give a try, and being able to touch the top menaces, they've got okay matchups maybe against the Stardies, just because you have enough wounds, and if you tango, don't kill your opponent and keep them alive, you can heal in combat, they can go off to do the next thing, which is the worst thing in the world. Real problems there are Nemesis Claw, maybe having to deal with the ability to get back up from a higher tech circle. So I'm curious to see what you guys have done with your existing teams, and if there's stuff that travels over or things that I can pull over in building my own game plan.
I want to tap on the fact that Travis just very casually mentioned something extremely insightful, which is Wrecker Crew versus Nemesis Claw. The reason that it is like such an insanely like tough matchup is because of the comms jammers, which turns off like the entire ability of the Wrecker Crew. Where like they have they've got a lot of like cool tools, but they gain an extra APL if they shoot or fight, and that goes away when Nemesis Claw is there. So the fact that a big part of like the building strategy is like recognizing strengths, weaknesses, what that means versus other teams, and then looking for ways to mitigate that around other teams. And then just as like a quick touchdown, like there's so much just like seeing the ingredients that make things easy or tough, and like tapping on it and flying away. But like today we're gonna break down a little bit and like point out for the people looking to level up these little insights. So anytime we like smell these level up moments, we're gonna linger on them a little more.
All right,
Yes.
guys. Well, you guys have the floor. What are you guys doing? You're doing Warp Coven versus Higher Tech Circle, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the game plan that we came up with, I'm going to go over pretty quickly, and then I want to walk through the steps sort of I took mentally to try to figure out how we actually. And I did some of this stuff comes like after you play the game. Or some of this stuff, you run by other people because it's always great to talk to somebody else and take their insights and apply it to your own. But the game plan I came up with as Warp Coven versus Higher Tech is, of course, the first thing I have to say is, and this comes up a lot, is it depends. It always depends on what you're like, the map and the mission. And sometimes some TAC ops are going to be excellent in certain maps. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes the attack op can be good, but the other team is excellent on a certain map, and you're just not. It's like so again, everything has to be taken into context of where you're making the decision. But as a general game plan for Warp Coven versus Higher Tech, I like the idea of taking plant beacons.
Of taking what?
Plant beacons.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And why do I like that tack up? To sum it up, it's very easy to score for you. You can map it out pre-game. You know where you're going to put your beacons. You know what operatives roughly are going to put the beacons down. And Higher Tech can really interfere with your ability to score other TAC ops. Like with they can really get rid of your killing power, so you're not going to be as reliable if you need to score, or if you're trying to keep them out of your zone and you're scoring contain. You might not be able to get those confirmed kills that you want to get. And then they also might be able to just contest a lot harder than you might think if you're doing something like take ground. So given their ability to really mess with all of your stuff, I decided that it would be better with Jason to not really worry a whole lot about what they're doing, and then just play your strategy of planting beacons.
And this partially works because Zangor warriors get free mission actions, right?
Precisely. I was going to mention the lineup in a moment, and of course Zangor warriors are definitely part of that lineup because they let you plant your beacons a lot easier.
Yeah, this does touch in on one thing that I wanted to point out. There's another thing that you kind of like glazed over, where you said which operatives are going to place beacons, and for some people that are looking to level up, if you haven't hit this stage already, you should have a decision made before the game comes that it's like for a fact that this is the operative that, like, if you're playing a wide team like a horde that has a bunch of operatives, you're like, okay, the warriors are going to run out there and plant beacons. And you don't have to make a decision in game like, oh my goodness, my Incursor Marksman is going to run over here and plant a beacon, because that's not the Incursor Marksman's role. Like for Phobos, for example, I have warriors that will move, plant a beacon for free with their mission action, shoot twice, still do that. And Warp Coven, you have your Zangor warriors that do free mission actions in enemy territory. So like move in there, you'll like charge someone, kill like a wounded enemy, plant a beacon for free. And that's just like, that's another one of those like little ingredients where the big part of level up is choices you make before the game.
Absolutely. And speaking of choices you make before the game, you pick your primary op. Typically with Warp Coven and with this strategy, I'm going to pick it as the TAC op. It's really reliable to score those plant beacons. And you might as well put it on something where you can guarantee you're going to score high. Certain crit ops, you might also want to consider it. Let's say if like this was maybe a high square crit op like coordinates, you might have some really good play into denying your opponent the ability to score those 2 points when they're trying to tap your home objective. That might be something to consider maxing out, or could not. It depends on the map.
I think there's exactly 2 teams that should plan to take primary to be the grid up, and that would be the Farstalker Kinband and the new Rattlings that we've had a preview for. And the reason is because you never want to choose your primary op as something unless you know for a fact that you have like a power disparity over your enemy. And the Farstalker Kinband and the Rattlings both have the ability to poach objectives from your opponent. And this is going to be mission dependent, but like if it's loot and you're staged all over the board, and you're like staged on like contested enemy like hot zone, and you just like poach the objective from under them, that's like a power disparity. And then like kill op, it's pretty much only take kill op if you know that you have like insanely overpowered power disparity or just like skill disparity or something. And then tac op, the reason to take that is because the power disparity over tac op is it's of all of the recon tac ops, if you sit down and break them down, recover item, if I pick up the item, you can kill me and deny that point. If I choose confirm kill and I like stand on a token, you can charge me and not fight, and that turns off the point. But plant beacon, I plant the beacon and you can't deny it. It's the only one out of the 3 that you do the thing to score the point and your opponent can't do anything about it. So there's kind of been this like sweeping trend across all of like high level players in Kill Team talking about what's the best tac op, and plant beacons is pretty like plant beacons with the combination of free mission actions is like the most potent thing in the game, because you have operatives that do everything they want to do and they score points that your opponent cannot deny. So it's the biggest and the easiest like power scoring disparity that is available across the whole team, and like no one can do anything about it. So if you like take your primary as a tac op and you plant beacons, you have a very strong route to 9 points.
Absolutely. And then speaking of those free mission actions, when you're talking about the kind of lineup that you're taking as Warp Coven into Higher Tech here, you're going to definitely, if you're going with plant beacons, and then also, especially if the game is on a Galadark, you're going to want to make sure that one of your sorcerers has the mutant appendage boon so that they can do a free mission action. Again, beautiful way to play into that tac op, open those doors, get kills, eventually plant a beacon, perhaps. But again, all of your choices.
A pretty important little rider on the extra appendage, right?
I believe it does. I would have to double check.
It gives you the same ability as Poach, lets you do stuff when within engagement range. I don't think it gives you the ability to override control, but it does mean that if you're in control range, you can still do stuff, which is pretty powerful.
Ooh, I had not noticed that. That is very, very good.
Yeah, that's, again, they cannot stop winning.
To be fair, right now Warp Coven are probably a little bit overtuned. So right now we're talking about a plan for Warp Coven. We'll see if Warp Covens can remain as strong as they are. But the idea of looking at your strong suit and lining them up for a game plan is something that all good players have to do, right? When we talked with Void Dancers last week or a little bit ago, you know, Bart was talking about how when you go wide against the elites, you out-activate them, and then when you're going against the wider teams, you Astartes them and push. So it's like finding your strong suit and using it. And luckily for Quinn here, Warp Coven got a lot of strong suits right now.
I know I don't even have to pick one specific strong suit. I could just decide which one is good for me on that particular day.
Importantly enough, you do have to decide during the game. Obviously,
Yes.
You can use the scroll to let you basically pivot into a new plan in the middle of a game, but you do need to have all of the plans ready so that you're not just flipping around stuff in your 2-hour game and just like spending 15 minutes to try to make a decision, right?
And like honestly, Warp Coven has so many awesome tools that like no matter how hard they're hit with a nerf, there's still going to be some combination of these tools that like in the right hands, even if they get like borderline like nerfed into the dust, all is dust, they will still like have some amazing access to just like there's so many of these tools like the mutant appendage is going to fly under the radar. It's not going to take a nerf, and that's one of the highest tier, like most potent abilities in the game. So like no matter what kind of nerfs they take, it's just going to like take them off of easy mode, and they're still going to be an amazing team. Calling it right now.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think this actually brings us nicely into like what I would consider step one of I think Jason sort of helped me come up with this, or he referred to it as doing your homework. You gotta know your team's rules, and you gotta know the TAC Ops rules. You have to be able to figure out how your team with their rules is going to score that TAC Op. Against your opponent. So the first thing I like to do when I'm coming up with a game plan is I read my team's rules. Maybe it's for like the 5th time or whatever. And then I check the TAC Ops and I think to myself, how would I score this TAC Op with my team? What rules help me score my TAC Ops? So that's the first thing that I usually like to do. And then, so if we go back to the actual strategy I have, when we look at the lineup again, we have those Zangor warriors. So I took 3 Zangor warriors into my most recent game against Haratech, and the idea was to basically just use them as missile planting beacons. They didn't have to do too much besides maybe look kind of scary, and then run around and can probably die. The reason that they were going to do that and they weren't actually going to be like charging and fighting is that when you look at Hyrotech's rules and how they can actually play into melee teams, especially, they have a ploy that lets them get accurate 2 on their melee weapons if they are sitting around, and they have Tesla weaves, which if you charge into them, you end up taking like a D3 damage. So you're charging a 9 wound fucking bird goat man into this robot, and he deals probably like 2 damage to you, and then you're dealing with 2 auto hits, and suddenly your 4 up 4/5 balanced blades aren't actually looking like they're going to kill him. It's either like a coin flip or maybe less. So you're not really being super threatening with those Zangors too, though, or like most of the operatives on Hyrotech. But what they can do is position themselves to actually score those plans really well. That's what their job is. And then, of course, I'm taking the normal like the Tempurian Sorcerer. I'm taking the Warpfire Sorcerer. I'm taking the Destiny Sorcerer. I'm taking a Rubric, probably with Soul Reaper against Hyrotech, especially if they're taking that Psychomancer. I just want dice. They're shutting off my rerolls anyways. They're shutting off my crits. I just want to put damage into them overall. And then if we look at like the attack op lineup, we can probably pick the equipment. Probably looking at for Warp Coven, probably Sorcerer Scrolls. Take that every game. It's simply too good. You can't not take a boon that you haven't already taken and then use that to do a bunch of crazy stuff. Maybe get an extra inch and a charge. Maybe add a damage to normals against that Psychomancer that actually might be able to do something. It might turn that 14 wound Cryptek into a 3 normals situation instead of a 4 or 5 normals situation. And then you've got it. You'll end up taking cracks. You can combo those with Fate itself as my weapon. Again, we're talking about knowing your team's rules. You can guarantee hits with those cracks, even through a Psychomancer shut off Aura. You can take probably Razor Wire, maybe Barricades if you're into the dark, maybe Smokes. It depends. But that's sort of how I was putting together my game overall against Hyrotech. And I mentioned a lot of Hyrotech's rules just now. So one of the biggest things about doing your homework is doing homework on the enemy team. You got to know how the enemy team plays, and what's especially helpful is looking at their rules and seeing how those kinds of rules would affect you. Kept mentioning that Psychomancer aura. So they have an 8-inch, no rerolls, no crits aura thing. Is that right?
That's the Psychomancer's ability. Yep, the Nightmare Shroud stops all criticals, retains, and the ability for you to reroll dice within 8 inches of your Cryptek or your Apprentech, depending on who casts it, until the beginning of their next activation. Very powerful stuff. And I think over the course of the World Championships, most of the Hyrotech players started to use it a little bit more because it is very much akin to the Inquisitorial Agent's ability to just stop your opponent's special rules from working.
Yeah,
Yep.
very, very potent. Like, there's kind of been a huge wave of like severe Lethal 5 rendings, like so much that like gives so many crits, and like people have been like taking that for granted, and so much power comes from that. So the Psychomancer's just kind of silently shutting that down as a sleeper hit. I mean, like coming into Worlds, I was like, the thing I was the most worried about was like secretly higher tech, but like no one was talking about it. And stats have consistently proven to be that was a very worthwhile thing to worry about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You had like a lot of good things that you pointed out in like your preparation for the matchup. I think the way that I like to go about like choosing. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm new to playing a meta team because don't take my word for more than it should be, because I'm just like another kill team player. But I think my new outlook is look for something that is like a catch-all way to play, where you have like a baseline thing that's going to do well against everything in the meta, and then only have a couple of levers that you tweak for special occasions. And I think like my third edition Phobos journey is the perfect example, where my catch-all thing is like a pretty heavy in infiltrator skew now. I've been known for loving incursors, but in third edition, I think it's like generally it's either 4 infiltrators and 2 incursors, or 3 and 3, where the big strength of Phobos is Omni Scramble to essentially denounce people. If a Phobos Marine can see an enemy, you can freeze them to activate later as a strategic gambit, which is incredibly, incredibly potent. And if you're trying to like push super aggressively hard with Phobos Marines, you can just like stun an enemy on the approach, and then it doesn't matter who wins or loses initiative. And then incursors have always kind of been my secret weapon in the pocket of like getting the angles right to get shots that people aren't ready for is just incredibly potent. And
Yeah.
then the one thing that is like the exception to the rules is like people. I think Novitius is the perfect example, because it doesn't matter who has initiative, and it doesn't matter if I can ignore obscuring. You need to kill them in melee with like 9 damage of dice that you can push through, and nothing else matters. So then like it's like my mostly infiltrators and a couple incursors skew works against everything, but then you need to just like recognize when to be flexible and like tweak to match to hit the matchup, and that is like comes 100% from like experience.
Yep. One thing that I'd like to say about that, to your experience point, is that you can't sort of think your way out of playing a lot of games. As a new or mid-level player, you're not gonna. I don't know who you think you are. You're probably not like Professor X. I don't think you can just imagine games of Kill Team played out with all the rules perfectly memorized, and you have to come up with a strategy, and then you'll figure it out just by thinking about it super hard. You're probably gonna have to get out there and roll some dice with a real person, because it's just, at the end of the day, there's no substitute for actually seeing how a rule works on the table.
That's
You
like
got to do it.
that's like the biggest slam dunk piece of advice I've maybe like ever heard. I mean, there's so much. It seems like there should be some easy hacks to get good fast, but you're 100% right. There is no like cheat code. There's no way to just big brain think your way around playing a bunch of games. Like the best players are not just the best players because they're smart. It's also because they play a ton of games. So if you like hit a certain threshold of playing a bunch of games, like you're a big dog now.
You do need a certain level of practice intentionality that you can get out of playing with non-super strong players. However, there is nothing like testing yourself with someone else who is also trying to push your shit in. And it is just one of those things where if you never go to a tournament and you never want to be competitive, you are going to miss out on the experience you need to... What happens if I'm not playing optimally? Well, someone who is playing optimally is just not going to let you shoot in ways that make sense. Part of the skill is as the game goes on, people are more and more likely to make mistakes. The early mistakes that happen in your casual games happen less often in more competitive games, and you're going to have to find new ways to hit your opponents where it hurts. So right now, Quinn has talked about how Warp Coven has a lot of room to play on TAC Ops because we have a couple operatives that do free mission actions. Jason has used Phobos in much the same way, where some warriors float around to do free plant signal beacons because it is an easy way to go grab points, and then using that backdrop of 9 points in a 22-point game to go push your operatives to go find avenues to put stuff into your opponent. So when it comes to roadblocks in your plan, Warp Coven have a lot of room right now to be strong, and playing a lot is definitely going to be very important, especially in a complicated team like Warp Coven. What are you worried about when, putting practice into the real life? Like, where do you think your weak points are on coming up with this plan?
Yes. So I actually have a very nice little battle report that I wrote up with some big mistakes that I made against a local Necron player who will be joining me at LVO.
And one of the most important things about getting good practice in is not just passively playing your game, experiencing it, and being like, oh, I just lost a dice. Being able to know when you lost a dice versus when you lost your own decisions is very, very important. And being able to delineate those two things is actually what makes good practice and good players.
Absolutely. So when I went into this game against Hyrotech, had that plan that I drew up with Jason. I was going to focus on plant beacons. I was going to, pick my primary up as plant beacons. I did not for a really silly reason. I'll get into that in a bit. And then I was going to make sure that I knew where I was going to place my beacons, and then I was going to execute that strategy. I wasn't going to worry too hard about what Hyrotech was up to because, quite frankly, they have so many rules. It is hard to keep track of them, and I just can't do it yet anyways. And I just wanted to focus on scoring points instead of being like, oh my God, they can do all this crazy shit.
Honestly, a champion's perspective. That's like the best way to play. Now carry on.
Yeah. So like, I can't believe they can do all this shit. I'm crying. I'm pissing my pants. Like, it's over. No, you just got to get out there and like actually score your points. So in the game, some big mistakes I made were, and the biggest one was that my operatives, a few of them, were not positioned with the intent to score points or deny scoring points by my opponent future activations. This was a huge one. I put my Empyrean Sorcerer in a spot where he couldn't quite get to the Destiny Sorcerer to heal him or to leech Doombolt off of him to smash a Death Mark and prevent him from scoring upload coordinates on my home objective, right? That's 2 points. That's also probably more points if the Destiny Sorcerer stays alive to go and do a charge fight plant or a charge fight kill plant on a later activation. And then let's say, like, I think my Destiny Sorcerer didn't move into a certain room correctly to deny scoring by my opponent on a middle objective. I threw away a couple of my operatives accidentally with poor positioning. And if they had stayed alive, they could have, again, prevented scoring. Or they could have maybe moved further into my opponent's side of the board and gave me an easier time on scoring. I also forgot that I put a Rubing Marine on a center objective guarding it. If you forget what your guys are doing in the middle of the game, it's kind of difficult to like use all the very powerful things you've come up with because you forgot what was going on. This comes back to like knowing your team's rules. And honestly, more generally, you should put some time into just remembering the core rules of the game.
This is actually a fun one because there was a little bit of progression between the World Championships and the New York Open from one of the players who made top 16 at the World Championships. George from Canada came to the New York Open, was playing Warp Coven, had built into his setup basically like little colored tokens to go along with each of his operatives. So when the Temperian is putting it on a temporal flux, it's color coded to hit that wizard, and then the Warp Fire tokens are also color coded down to the operative that it's using. That way, when you drop down your Alight, which gives you Relentless, you know which sorcerer it's coming from and how long it's going to last. And having little tricks like this mean that you don't have to do the Mind Palace and know everything, which is definitely a thing you can do. But the more you can externalize and remind, the less that you have to actively think about it, and the more it can become a background process. Or you could just be a Giga Brain. Both of those are perfectly legal, but Giga Brains are just a little bit rarer.
Yes, and also you're handicapping yourself if you are going to declare yourself a Giga Brain, because someone else is going to Giga Brain themselves and have a reminder. So like Quinn said about like remembering when you're on guard. I mean, I've had the same problem, but like I knew I was on guard, but I didn't like realize the context of it. But like as one extra little thing that I've done, if I have someone on guard or track target or whatever, I have these little like 3D printed green exclamation points, and I set them next to the models that are on guard. And then this helps me remember, and it helps the opponent remember. And then when they start making decisions around the fact that this model's on guard, we both remember, and it helps us both out. And like, if you have a well-placed guard, it will full-blown, like, you don't care at all that they know. And you're like, gotchas are not like the name of the game anyways. Especially because that was one of the biggest realizations I had when I went from being like a really good local player to being a really good player across multiple metas. I can travel for tournaments and do well, which is, don't rely at all on gotchas. Rely on like these bulletproof strategies where it doesn't matter what your opponent does. That's like the biggest level up moment for anyone. So and that's part of like, if you can be a creative person that can scour all the team rules and find a way. So it's like, so a couple things I'm cooking up. For the only teams that can do crit op, like I mentioned earlier, are Ratlings and Farstalker Kinband. You have disparity there. And maybe there's a little bit of gotcha there, where it's like people aren't like, you're playing a part of the meta that no one is gunning for. So you can kind of just like slide in there. And people that know the game well, you're still gonna just like fly under the radar. And it's not a gotcha. It's more of just like dodging their expectations, but like they could see it coming if you were predictable. Never let them know your next move. So that's kind of like, that's the crit up way to play. And then like the tac ops way to play is like, look for free mission actions and plant beacons. The other ones are like easily deniable, and you can sit down and spend 15 minutes thinking about your tac ops and debunk it, and you will arrive at the same conclusion that plant beacons is the best by far. And then the last one would be like kill ops. And there's not really, I mean, I guess the closest to like kill ops disparity is Hyrotech Circle. And that's part of why their win rate is so frighteningly high. Because we're back to the super KG meta where turning point 1 doesn't matter. 2 and 3 is super aggressive. And then turning point 4 is like clean up the mess. And if you are just coming back to life throughout that, your kill op gives you a point or two. And now all of a sudden your win rate is going to jump by like 15%. And we see that in the weekly stats. Like Hyrotech Circle, bananas. And when it comes to trying to find something way off the beaten path, the thing that I'm looking for is with scouts. And I don't know if I'm going to sniff it out or not, but it's essentially a combination of I'm playing scouts with kill op main. And I'm just like running in with knives and going crazy. And like, you're gonna be betrayed on the dice, and I know that, and like I've smelled that out, and it's like it's definitely gonna happen, and you can't blame dice, even though it's tempting. And then after we played our game, we both agreed and was like, oh man, there was some bad dice. But honestly, if bad dice can crump your strategy, it's not a good strategy. So that's another huge important thing, as we kind of touched on. But so I'm trying to sniff out, can I play scouts with kill op? And then can kill op synergize with confirm kill? So then it's like you just like absolutely push hard in one side, obliterate everyone. You don't even give people the opportunity to deny countering it, because you push so hard, you crush everything in the area, and then people deny it by like charging and not fighting, but you kill them all and you push hard early, and scouts have the tool to do that, because if the enemy pushes too hard, you have like triple arms, booby traps, all that kind of nonsense, and then you just go for a insanely early aggressive push. I don't know. This is just me tiptoeing in like unknown territory, looking for some nonsense, because I've done that before, and that was like It's the same ingredients that I used for play all in cursors with no conceal orders, and that was a legend. It was legendary. I don't care who says otherwise. Like, that was amazing. Super cool.
Luckily for us, as far as the Warp Coven changes for Quinn, you had a plan going in. You did some stuff that maybe may or may not have worked, which might be as good as being able to push in, because it turns out Warp Coven can also push with melee operatives and try to do a confirm kill plan along with some dudes in the back. So have you ever thought about trying to switch up your game plan away from planting signal beacons and trying to do something a little off kilter to try to get an advantage by throwing your opponent off the scent?
Yes. So in another game that I've played, I haven't really done a whole lot of thinking about confirmed kill yet and when I would take it. But the first thing that jumped out to me when I played against Felgor was that confirmed kill might be something to take against them. Just in terms of like contain probably not being something that I'd be able to score reliably against Felgor. They have too many big brick bodies moving up the field, and they're going to probably get in your territory, and you're not going to score it, and it's going to be sad. Even though you think, oh, how can I possibly lose when I have the best gun in the game? But if you understand that, yes, they're going to get on my side of the board, but you should be able to make them really hurt for it by shooting at them and then making their charges suck. And if their charges suck, they're going to die, and you're going to just be able to sit on those tokens and pick them up. So I figured that against Felgor, confirmed kill probably might be a move, depending on how aggressive the Felgor player. And probably it's a good bet that they're going to hurdle a couple of bodies at least at you every. So I think that against Felgor, probably confirmed kill might be a solid as Warp Coven. Against,
that seems like a solid way of framing being able to change up your plans. So obviously plant signal beacons or plant beacons is a pretty strong plan A, but when you know your opponent is going to press up to the mid board and send in melee missiles, you can also prep by doing confirm kill, because once those guys come in and you kill them, you still get a point. And it's particularly nice because you're playing Warp Coven, which between Fate itself as my weapon and all this dust on your rubrics allows multiple operatives to kind of work as just a scratch operatives that come in and let your opponent not hit you as hard, right?
Pretty much, yeah. You just move one of those rubric fellas up somewhere, and you're like, okay, you have them if you want. You're probably not going to get them. Maybe you put a sorcerer behind that rubric to make sure that you can mop up anybody that charges your rubric and tries to get the kill on him. Maybe you fall back and shoot with the rubric if it has a warp flamer. But yeah, you just make sure that you are positioned to score those points or deny your opponent from scoring those points with your big key pieces. And that's how you can try to maybe formulate a plan around Felgor if you have pieces that are pretty survivable and can stand on those tokens and control them. That was my thought, again, with Warp Coven into Felgor to take confirmed kill. Yeah, I think that this brings, for me anyways, it is important to really understand how the enemy team plays overall, besides just like looking at their individual rules. Because it's really easy to get sucked down into like a rabbit hole where you're rolling dice and you're like, oh my god, this one very specific rule for this team could like potentially wreak havoc with my dice rolls. But it's like, okay, you're looking at that rule. It's great that you found like a bad situation that you might want to avoid, but do you actually understand how they're going to apply these rules to your team? Like, do you know how the Felgor player probably is going to move their pieces around up and at you? Do you know how Hyrotech Circle is going to walk their robots up the field at you and like actually apply their rules to your team? Because if you don't, that's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you gotta know how they're actually gonna like move the pieces. Otherwise, it's not super worth it.
That's so true. I mean, like, it's very easy to cry about ignore piercing is so strong, but like if you have tools to get around it, like it's totally there. And if you spent your time figuring out how to get around it instead of crying about it, like it's there. So like orcs, for example, they've got like 5 or 6 dice against everything. It's like instead of like 4 dice piercing, now they have like 6 dice not piercing, net gain. Like it's amazing. Like 6 dice is straight up better against the entire field because you have the same exact effect, except the fact that you ignore piercing. There's a lot of stuff out there, and instead of just like reading the internet opinions, being afraid, crying about it, you should look at the things that are scary and secretly plot a way to defeat it. And if you can do that, that will also immediately level you up. Because a huge part of the game and like getting better is attitude. It's like having a plan to beat things that look scary instead of just crying about it. Huge. Never blame dice. Huge. Super important. And everything that like that I've seen from you throughout our experience, like playing the game, like we never blame. We hit a point where I had to blame dice, and I was like, yeah, but if we hit there was stuff I could have fixed, which is so true. And like you played well, you did amazing. I've got like high hopes for you and your future in competitive kill team.
Okay. Do you guys want to move on to maybe helping Travis figure out a strategy for his Rekka crew against a scary meta team like Hyrotech or someone else?
Yeah, we could certainly give that a run for my money. You know, Wrecker Crew are a new team that comes with 2 very big tools that loop into the team-wide faction ability. So against something like Hyrotech Circle with Psychomancer floating around, I'm not going to be able to reliably get new crits. Luckily for me, my goal is to just roll 6 dice at a time and get some explosions to ramp up my Rekka points so that when I go in, I reliably do what I need to. And I think I'm going to take a page out of Bart's playbook and basically hold the violence for as long as possible, because really you want to make your kill up count. So holding for turns 3 and 4 so that I can narrow down the range that my opponent can actually try to get a kill, or sending out a missile to kill exactly the reanimator bug early on seems pretty reasonable to me. Though, looking at the 2 bomb squigs, sending them out to go hit, if I can actually hit 1 or 2 targets, because you can add in Kaboom, which is a blast ramp. So taking your little squig and telling your opponent very notably that you have a 1-inch blast and that you can make it a 2-inch blast means that eventually someone during the pressure of a game might crack. And if you line it up because you've punched holes in the terrain with your Breacher Boy fighters, which I do think I need to have more of. So unfortunately, I need to go build 1 or 2 more of those.
I was going to say exactly maybe 1 more, maybe 2 more, but I think maybe 1 more. Just proxy it.
Which means that way you can have your bomb squigs run through enemy lines into the correct spot, do a thermonuclear explosion, try to farm up some Rekka points so that your boss knob with 2 rocket pistols or your backup fighter with 4 attacks can guaranteed 4 hits. Because 4 hits kills any Necron except for the Psychomancer and the Apprentice, because they have more wounds. So being able to line those up and hold the violence while playing a little KG definitely seems like it might make some sense.
It's like looking for these power disparities and these asymmetrical threats is like a big thing. Actually, real quick shout out to the 12 Days of Christmas, which by maybe we'll be on like day 11, I don't know. For the command point 12 Days of Christmas, George pointed out like one of the big things is like looking for these asymmetrical threats, and like he put it such a concentratedly, like amazingly well put thing there. I think a potent combo of these asymmetrical threats with the Rekkas is you have one of the Rekka boys that punches a hole in a wall, that like you stage one of your bomb squigs right behind it, and then a Rekka boy punches a hole, and now you can't see through it, but a bomb squig with an engage order can full-blown run through it. You have set up a non-reciprocal threat. So the fact that you're forced to have 2 bomb squigs makes me feel like I would want to never not take 2 of the basic fighters that can punch holes in walls, and then you have two flanks on like on 2 different parts, whether it's like the hard outsides or the middle or one of each or whatever. You have two of these pairs where you punch a hole in a hard wall and a bomb squig runs through and blows someone up. And like the board control from that is going to be very strong, and the threat projection of that is going to be very strong. And for that reason, I think you need two of the melee fighters that punch holes in the walls.
There's also another cute thing that you can do for opening up some threat lanes on top of Volcus, because the bomb squid can hide behind some of those buildings. So if you punch a hole in a wall from the roof, he can blip through the wall, and then the drop is basically only 1 inch. So you can now jump over some engagement ranges or cut people out. So it depends on where the boxes are, but there are a couple spots that you can do. And with the power of jumping, there are some extra movement lanes that might come up throughout a game.
I'd fully not thought of that, and that is so amazing. I love that.
That's sick. Jason, you brought up something that was really, really important to, I think, talk a little bit more about. And that was like setting up multiple threats. And then specifically, if we're talking about setting up multiple threats into Irotech, probably if they're taking the Psychomancer, they do have an ability that lets them actually potentially delay an activation. So one way to play around that ability is to, again, do what Jason said and set up multiple threats so that even if they roll that dice in later activation, doesn't matter. It's a strategy that is ironclad, that is really making it tough for your opponent to do what they want. But it's also something I think that's sort of an interesting balance to strike, is that it's not worth like stressing out so much about and changing your entire strategy to actually like work around their whole ability, because it's like sure, it sucks that they can do that, but you should be able just to generally set up and play in a way where you can get around that kind of ability. And it makes me think a lot about like abilities on the enemy team that are worth noting but not worth overstressing. So I think,
for example, Nemesis Claw have the ability to turn off my APL gain from the Rekka Boys, and that definitely sucks. However, my only goal is to kill my opponents, because I'm not going to win on mission objectives when I cannot get to 3 APL. So instead of trying to do anything fancy, I'd probably go with something like Overrun, something like Kill Op, or the secondary tack op, and just blitz my opponent, because there's no way I'm going to fight on the APL side of the game once there are 6 Nemesis Claw with 8-inch bubbles of no APL gain, right? Quite.
Yeah, just violence to 11.
Yep,
Compared to
absolutely.
something like the Tesla weaves on the higher tech circle, which if I'm sporting 12 wounds, probably is not going to hit a breakpoint that I particularly care about when Necrons are doing 3-4 damage. When I'm playing something like Hand of the Archon or any of the elf teams, those Tesla weaves break all of the breakpoints, because going from 8 wounds down to 6 basically means that any Necron tier can kill you. But if I have 12 wounds, not necessarily guaranteed to break a breakpoint, right?
Yep, absolutely. And this again comes back to knowing your team's rules. What are they good at? How does that actually help you advance your game plan and score those points? Like it all comes back to kind of doing your homework.
Yeah. There is like two more pieces that kind of interact with do your homework. One of them, we've been chatting a lot about wound breakpoints, and I think that's a huge thing, and not enough people have talked about that. But when it comes to like wound breakpoints, it's things like realizing how many hits it's going to take to incapacitate a certain operative. So it's like 7 versus 8 wounds. What kind of weapons do you need to bring? 7 versus 10 wounds. What kind of weapons do you need to bring? The biggest wound breakpoint in the game is actually 12 to 13, which is very interesting because Rekka crew have the choice whether to bring 6-inch move and 12 wounds or 5-inch move and 13 wounds. And the biggest, it doesn't sound like a lot. +1 wound. Not really significant. But 12 to 13 across the entire game is the hugest, most important breakpoint in the game. Because if it's like, let's look at it from like 2 damage weapons, it's going to take 6 wounds, 6 hits to kill 12. 7, that's an extra hit to kill 13. 3, it's going to take 4 hits that are damage 3, or 5, that's an extra hit. 4, it takes an extra hit. 5, doesn't matter, there's hardly anything that's damage 5. 6, takes an extra hit. 7, doesn't matter because there's nothing that's damage 7. So it's like 13 across every single damage profile takes an extra hit. And if you sit down and do the homework, you're like, okay, I fully see it. The +1 wound is enormous. It's so important. And that's one of the things about like wound breakpoints and doing your homework. Huge, incredible. As a Rekka player, you need to be incredibly in tune with when you care about 12 or 13 wounds and when you care about 5 or 6-inch move. The other thing, Quinn, you sort of like touched on this. You made a point about like stand your ground strategically was like the bullet point note that I like extracted from the thing you said, where it's like if you have a plan, don't get spooked by your enemy's rules. Just stick with it and go there. And that was one of the like hardest lessons I ever had to learn in competitive Kill Team, especially like in my crazy era of don't use conceal orders, because I was like, it's like you get spooked by what people can do, but just like stand your ground and spook people even harder. Because like, I mean, this is a way outlier thing that doesn't matter anymore. But like, don't use conceal orders and just bully people on angles and craziness. And like, I'm sweating and super scared the whole time, but my super crazy angles and threat ranges spook people even harder. And after like 50 games of not using conceal orders, I'm like, stand your ground strategically and just like bully people on like spooky mind games is such an incredibly like potent and powerful thing.
Yeah, I think looking at the wound breakpoint little mini game, you know, when you decide to take that 13th wound or that 12th wound is definitely going to play into some mind games. And unfortunately, it feels like the Breakaway fighters, when you want to punch holes in the walls, you do feel a little bit punished because that 1 extra inch of movement would make a lot of that movement game much, much stronger. So there is a little bit of pressure there. So it does feel like while I would emotionally feel like 13 wounds is good against the power swords, there might actually be better arguments against the elves where you just want to set up punch holes in the walls and asymmetrically set up threats while your opponent has to naturally come through the doors with you.
That is
so
huge.
I think there's some interesting games there. One of the fun other things is because you can break a hole in terrain that is 1 inch wide, you can, from what I understand, drop it onto vantage floors and turn them into accessible. So there are going to be a couple cute things where you can punch a hole in the floor, drop through, donk someone on the head.
Damn.
Unfortunately, those are all things that you have to do in advance of your actual charge fight moves because Rekka crews need to get in position and do charge fight to get the 3rd APL. So, you know, one of those things that's pretty important. Getting grenades also pretty important on Rekka crews so that each of your boys can do charge fight shoot. With the hope that some of your Rekka points have already set you up for success. So when you actually throw the crack grenades, you're actually landing all 4 hits. So, you know, against Higher Tech Circle, it's definitely an uphill battle. But if I take the engine oil, I take the 13th wound, that one is probably not as necessary against the idea of Higher Tech Circle if I'm going to play KG and defensively the whole time. And I'm going to have a couple Breakaway fighters. Because really, I want to have the movement advantage against Higher Tech Circle. I'm going to punch holes in walls so they can't touch me before I touch them. They can't shoot me before I charge them because I'm always going to be out of line of sight. And then my 2 bomb squigs can go in and blow up to go farm me those first set of Rekka points.
And then at that point, it doesn't matter that you have 12 wounds, which is actually something I had completely overlooked. Because I was like, the 13 wound breakpoint is so important, I would never not take it. And I think that's folly.
Yes, because I'm intending to use the Breakaway fighters to manipulate the terrain a little bit, I'll have a little bit more leeway to not get shot at, especially on Volcus. When it comes to something like in the dark, there's probably a little bit less leeway to do some of this fun stuff because you do need to just have terrain floating around for the Breakaboys to be able to do fun stuff.
What base size is the Breakaway?
They're all on 32s and 40s, and then the squigs are on 25s.
So like the Breakaboys are on 32s. What do they look like?
They are pretty hunched over, but they can definitely get shot behind light terrain with Seek Light.
So it's okay for proxies. I'm just thinking about like being the practical person to play Rekka crew. Buy 1 box and then get like scrounge up 1 extra orc and call him an extra fighter boy.
That is my plan. Yep.
Yeah.
So Quinn, do you have any holes that you want to poke into my silly Rekka boy plan of staging up, punching holes, sending in my bomb squigs, and then charging in to finish the job somewhere around turns 3 and 4?
Well, you know what, Travis, honestly, I don't really know the Rekka Crew's rules very well. Sue me. Yeah, I can't particularly find a flaw in it too quickly with just like a glance. I honestly, when it comes to this kind of thing, I do have to sit down and take the time to figure out what's going to happen with these kind of interactions. I don't know enough about everything to come up with it on the fly most of the time. To be
I think,
fair.
one fun hole that you could try to poke is that if I'm going to take something like Overrun and Storm objectives or Champion against Higher Tech Circle, they do have the ability to get back up over time. So maybe Overrun is not really a good idea. I could instead try to go for the security route and fight them on the same
Oh,
ground
okay.
of take ground or contain, where I'm staging up inside of a box and they're trying to stage up inside of a box. And because we have Swiss cheese walls, I have the advantage of hitting them first when they get inside the box. Or I'm in the box and I use my 1 inch of movement advantage to get around them. So that's another way that I could go about shifting my overall plan of ultra violence around a specific team like Higher Tech Circle, switching to something like Take Ground, especially on the Volcus missions where there are 2 boxes on the midline and both of the boxes are up for grabs.
Absolutely. I think one thing to consider is how are you going to kill a couple of the same guys several times? Because you do have to just remember that you can clear them off one turn. You just have to be able to clear them off again and make sure that your guys you aren't losing that war of attrition in the process. I think that's what makes a take ground, for me at least, really tough to score against Hyra Tech. It's kind of difficult to conceptualize, sort of not having them lose operatives until you experience it a couple of times. Oh, okay, like they're coming back. It's going to be difficult for me to continue to secure the same points, especially because they can actually just like keep piling guys onto it. So that might be a reason for you not to take um, secure or take ground into them. But again, if there's a flaw in how I reason about that one, please point it out to me because we are all here to.
See, there's actually one more fun trick that specifically plays into the security centric team's desire to play take ground, and that's the Tank Buster Rocketeer. Because he's got a blast 2 weapon that you can juice to blast 3. Someone wants to stand inside the small box and fight you over a box. Suddenly the Rocketeer can now do a relentless, severe blast 3, 4, 5 with 6 dice, limited 1 relentless shot, which should basically nuke anything off of an objective, even though you are hitting on 5s, because 6 dice severe hitting on 5s relentless with blast 3 means that if you can juice it up to, turn 3, turn 4, you're fighting over these take ground, contain things. Suddenly your opponent has to have a cluster somewhere to fight over these objectives, and then you just blow up the whole thing.
And that's why it's important to do your homework, folks, because if you are thinking about playing take ground on Volcus into Wrecker Crew, this might be something that causes you a lot of problems. So you might want to rethink doing take ground, especially on those juicy maps where there's a beautiful Volcus stronghold right in the middle. It's just precisely on the center line, right there for you to take. And on the other side is the Tank Buster Rocketeer. What are you going to do? Like,
Part of the
again,
fun, man. Being
go
able to
back,
come up with game
rethink it.
plans, look at how your opponents generally play their game plans, and readjusting those game plans is part of the reason why I like Kill Team compared to something like 40K, because so many of 40K's games are playing your own rules better than your opponent can play their own rules, because there's not a lot of game interplay. That's probably not true at a very high level. However, at the mid level, it takes a long time for players to get to the point where they are competent enough with their own games, because getting repetitions just takes so long in Warhammer 40K. Whereas like in Kill Team, you play 6 hours, you play 1 tournament, you're already 3 games all the way through, and those 3 games, each game you're getting better and better and better. And that's why going to these huge tournaments, Quentin, you're going to LVO. It sounds like you've been doing a lot of scheming. So hopefully all of those schemes do some work. As far as, upcoming Colorado tournaments, it sounds like you're a little bit far away from some of the busier hives of, Colorado, Segmentum Colorado. But are there any tournaments coming up that you want to go to that are prepped for LVO? It sounds like you got one other friend. How are you guys prepping for LVO right now in the local Colorado tournament scene?
So I am, and then this also plays into improving at Kill Team. I'm scheduling roughly once a week. I'm getting a TTS game with somebody from my local scene, who's going to LVO. That we're all, roughly at a similar level of skill. So we know the matchup prior. We craft a plan. We go in, play once a week, get at least one really high quality game in. I am a fan of getting one really good game in over several mediocre games, or not mediocre, but games with less intentionality. And so I've been doing that. We've got a pseudo tournament, I like to call it, but the week before LVO, we are doing a 3-round pairing day down in the Denver metro area. So if you're listening to this and you want to come and participate in that, please join the Segmentum Colorado Discord, and then you can, come on down and play 3 games in a day. Not a tournament, a pseudo tournament. We're going to use the LVO terrain. We're going to use clocks. It'll be a nice piece of preparation, especially for people who haven't played a tournament in a while. Me, it has been a long time since I played in a tournament.
Nice. Well, we've got a link to another Colorado podcast that we did a ways back, so we'll drop those in the show notes for anyone who hasn't dropped by to visit Segmentum Colorado. But hopefully there are some other prospective players out there who know about this tournament and are getting ready to come. Quinn, thanks a lot for coming on and talking about how you're building up Warp Coven game plans. And Jason, as always, thanks for going over some of your secret tech for scouts and just running it down the board, pushing hard with confirm kill, because it sounds like that plan might actually work in some other cases. So if I could do something similar to Record Crew and Overrun, that's definitely something I'm looking to do.
Yes, and thank you, listeners, for listening until the end.